Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Heinrich Müller, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 28 years old. Before the war, my world was soil. It had a weight, a smell, a language I understood. I was a farmer, you see, from the hills near Kirchheim. My hands knew the heft of a potato, the sharp edge of a scythe, the warmth of the earth after a spring rain. I believed in cycles, in seasons. You plant, you tend, you harvest. You respect the land and it provides. It is a partnership built on patience and understanding. The earth was a cradle, a promise of life. The war taught me the earth could also be a tomb. People ask what it was like in the East. They want to hear about the battles, the ideology, the grand movements on the map. They talk of Bolshevism, of defending the homeland. And yes, those words were in the air, like smoke from a distant fire. But when you're standing in the black mud of Ukraine, knee-deep in autumn's cold grip, those grand ideas shrink. They become very small. They become about the man next to you, about a dry pair of socks, about the next meal. And for me, a farmer, it became about the ground beneath my feet. A farmer knows the earth. It is your partner. But in Russia, the earth became something else. It became a hungry, indifferent thing. And in a nameless village by the Dnieper, I learned what it feels like when the world turns itself upside down and buries you alive. It was late September. The air had that sharp, metallic taste of coming winter. We'd been falling back for weeks, falling back, a polite term for running. The great Dnieper River was behind us, a vast, gray wound in the landscape. We weren't conquerors anymore. We were just men trying to hold a line that dissolved like sugar in the rain. Our unit, the 34th Division, was bled white. The new faces were young, their eyes too wide, their hands still soft. They didn't know the sounds yet. They hadn't learned the difference between the whistle of a mortar and the scream of a Katyusha rocket, the Stalin's organ, we called it. One sounded like death looking for you, the other, like death, had already found your address. We were holed up in what was left of a village. The name is gone now, erased by shells. It was just another collection of broken teeth on the jawbone of the front. I was in the cellar of a farmhouse with 5 others. Klaus the corporal, a city boy from Berlin who was always trying to make jokes. Young Peter, who couldn't have been more than 18, constantly writing letters home that he could never send. The others were just tired faces in the gloom. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, stale sweat, and fear. It reminded me of my own root cellar back home, a place of peaceful, slumbering life, potatoes, apples, preserves. Here, the smell was different. It was the smell of decay. The earth was not resting, it was waiting. My skill, if you could call it that, was the land. The officers noticed it. I could look at a fold in the ground and know where water would pool. I could read the trees and find the easiest path. It was a farmer's knowledge, useless, I thought, when the sky itself was the enemy, but it kept me observant. I remember noticing the way the mortar on the cellar walls was crumbling, the deep cracks in the foundation from a previous shelling. The house was tired, the land was tired, we were all tired. Klaus was in the middle of a bad joke about a field marshal and a chicken when the world ended. It didn't begin with a whistle. It began with a sound that was not a sound. It was a pressure, a physical punch to the air that made your teeth ache and your lungs collapse. The first shell from the barrage hit somewhere close, and the cellar vibrated, shaking dust from the ceiling beams. Peter cried out, a thin, sharp sound. Another punch, closer this time. The lantern on our makeshift table danced, then fell, plunging us into absolute darkness. Then came the organ. It's a sound that crawls inside you and builds a nest of terror in your gut. A rising, unholy screech of a dozen rockets at once, then the ground begins to heave. It's not like an earthquake. An earthquake is the earth moving. This is the earth being violated, torn apart. The noise is everything. It is a physical wall that you can't see or touch, but it crushes you. My farmer's mind, the part of me that understood order, simply broke. There is no cycle here, no season. This is chaos made manifest, short, sharp sentences. That's how you think. Get down, cover head, don't breathe dust. The floor jumped. A crack of splintering wood from above. A scream cut short. The wall beside me groaned, a deep, guttural sound like a dying beast. My only thought, a primal, stupid one, was of my fear, being buried, the earth taking me. A pressure built around us, immense and final. Then came a sound like the spine of God snapping in two. The ceiling above us didn't just collapse. It detonated downwards, wood, stone, dirt. A universe of debris slammed into me. I was thrown against the far wall. The air vanished, replaced by a thick, choking cloud of mortar, dust, and ancient soil. I tasted it, I breathed it. It filled my mouth, my nose, my lungs. Something heavy pinned my legs. My left arm was twisted under me at an angle that felt wrong. And then the pressure in my ears equaled the pressure outside, and there was only silence. A ringing, profound silence and the utter, complete absence of light. My first thought was not of survival, it was of outrage. This was wrong. The earth holds you, it doesn't crush you. It supports life, it doesn't suffocate it. My thoughts were stripped gears, grinding uselessly against a reality I couldn't process. I tried to call out. A dry, pathetic croak was all that came out. The dust was a plug in my throat. I could hear nothing, not the groans of the wounded. Not Klaus's bad jokes, not Peter's quiet sobbing. Nothing. The silence was heavier than the rubble. Time ceased to exist. Was it minutes? Hours? My world was the size of my body. The pain in my legs was a dull, constant fire. The pain in my arm was a sharp, searing counterpoint. I tried to move, to shift the weight. The debris above me shifted with a terrifying groan, and a shower of dirt fell on my face. I froze. Patience, Heinrich, you are a farmer. You know how to wait for the seed to sprout. You must wait now, but this was not a seed. This was a grave, and I was not waiting for life. My greatest fear was my reality, buried alive. My breath became loud in my ears, a frantic engine threatening to stall. I had to control it. I remembered burying potatoes for the winter. You place them carefully in the dark earth, and they wait dormant through the cold. I had to become like a potato, still, quiet, conserving everything. I slowed my breathing, counting each one. Inhale the dust, exhale the dust. A slow, agonizing rhythm. Sensory ghosts came to visit me in the dark. I smelled the rich, damp scent of my own fields after a storm, a smell of life and promise. Then the illusion would shatter, and I'd be back in the choking stink of death and broken stone. I felt the sun on my neck as I worked the fields, a warm, benevolent weight. Then I would feel the crushing, malevolent weight of the dead house on my chest. I fought to stay sane. I counted my comrades, Klaus, Peter, 2 others. 5 heartbeats, now there was only mine, a frantic drum in a tomb of silence. Once I heard something, a distant, rhythmic thumping, digging. My heart surged with a desperate, painful hope. They were digging for us. I tried to shout, to make a noise. I scrabbled with my free hand, tapping a piece of wood against a larger stone. Tap, tap, tap. The thumping continued for what felt like an eternity, then it faded, and it did not return. The silence that came back was worse than the first one. It was a silence filled with abandonment. They had given up. They had moved on. My thirst became a living thing, a creature with claws in my throat. My mind started to play tricks. I saw streams of clear water. I saw my wife Greta bringing me a cool stein of beer. I drifted. Was I dead? Was this it? I felt a strange calm settle over me. The farmer's acceptance. Some seasons the harvest fails. The frost comes too early. The rains never arrive. This was just my failed harvest. But something in me, some stubborn root, refused to let go. I began to explore my prison with my one free hand. I felt splintered wood, rough stone, and soft, yielding dirt. The dirt, the farmer's friend. It was loose in one spot near my head. I began to dig, not with frantic energy, but with the slow, patient movements of a man planting a seed. Scoop, push, for hours or days. My fingernails broke, my fingers bled. I didn't care. It was a task. It was order in the chaos, and then a change. The dirt fell away into nothing, a space. I pushed my hand through, then my arm. Air, cool, fresh air. It wasn't the smell of a cellar. It smelled of smoke and rain. I worked with a renewed, feverish strength, clawing, pulling, widening the hole until I could get my head and shoulders through. I pushed myself up, my trapped legs screaming in protest, and I emerged from my grave. I blinked against a gray, weeping sky. The light was a physical blow. The world was unrecognizable. The village was gone, not damaged, gone, erased. Splintered wood and craters filled with muddy water were all that remained. The silence was absolute. No gunfire, no shouting, no engines, just the soft sigh of the wind through the ruins. I was alone. I looked down at the pile of rubble from which I had crawled. It was the only grave marker in a cemetery of a village. My comrades were still in there. The house had become their tombstone. I managed to pull my legs free. One was broken, the other a mess of torn flesh. I stood leaning on a shattered wall and I looked east. Nothing. I looked west. Nothing. The entire German army, the entire Soviet army. They were gone. The front had moved on. In my 2 days in the earth, the battle had swept over me and left me behind, a piece of human debris forgotten by the tide of war. I went back to farming after the war. The doctors saved my leg mostly. It aches when the cold comes, a reminder, but for years I could not stand to be in my own root cellar. The smell of the damp earth, the quiet dark, it would bring it all back. The weight. Every time I turned the soil with my plow, a part of me remembered being under it. The land was no longer just a place of life. I had learned its other nature. It can hold you, and it can keep you. Propaganda and the speeches of leaders tell you that you are a vital part of a great machine, a a single, important seed in a mighty forest. They tell you your sacrifice matters to a grand design, but war teaches you the brutal truth. In the final accounting, you are utterly alone. The hardest battle is not against the enemy you can see or the shells you can hear. It's against the silence that comes after everyone has left. It's learning how to live when the world has already buried you and walked away. This memory is a piece of shrapnel I carry. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.